Welcome to the Kenya Wanamatam Movement, the KWM Deep Dive. Our goal here is pretty straightforward. We cut through the noise, the official stories, and really dig deep. We want to pull out the essential knowledge, the real insights from history, from what's happening now, so that you, the citizen, end up genuinely well-informed. Dangerously so, maybe.
And today's deep dive, it feels particularly critical. We're trying to restore a story that seems, well, stolen.
Yeah.
Our sources, especially the KWM's own declaration and this document, We Must Never Forget These Kenyan Heroes, they really force us, don't they, to look at some hard truths about patriotism, about betrayal, right here in Kenya.
Absolutely. And you feel the urgency, I think, when you look at the KWM mandate itself.
Yeah.
It's putting everyone on notice, isn't it? Current leaders, future leaders, presidents, cabinet, parliament, county officials.
Yeah.
The message is crystal clear.
Yeah.
Serve the people. Serve the people, you'll be impeached, you'll be kicked out. By our votes, even before one term is up.
Exactly. That accountability piece is central. And it really grows out of these historical injustices, these patterns of betrayal that we're about to unpack. It's like the failures of the past are fueling this demand for action right now.
So the big question hanging over us, based on this material, we must never forget these Kenyan heroes. It's pretty stark, isn't it? Kenya's history has these incredible figures, patriots, who literally gave their freedom, their blood for justice. Yet when you walk the streets, look at the monuments, even the money, who do you see honored? It's mostly the powerful, the wealthy, and let's be honest, often those who kind of subverted the very ideals of independence.
It's a jarring contrast. You've got these grand monuments, guarded mausoleums for leaders whose administrations, well, oversaw massive accumulation of wealth under questionable circumstances.
While the people who actually stood for equality for the common person often lie in forgotten, maybe even unmarked graves.
Yeah. So let's dig into how this silencing happened. How were these genuine heroes pushed aside? We should probably start with those who used their intellect, their words, to challenge the new state right after independence, the intellectuals and reformers.
Right. This first group is key. These weren't soldiers primarily. They were thinkers, journalists, activists, even some honest officials inside the system, people who saw almost immediately that the new post-independence government was starting to mirror the old colonial ways, just with different faces.
They saw the hypocrisy early on.
They did, and they used ideas, journalism, principled stands to challenge it, and the cost, as we'll see, was immense.
Let's start with Pinto Gama Pinto. His name should be everywhere, shouldn't it? In history books, on street signs. But he's often just a footnote. He wasn't just part of the freedom struggle. He was a radical socialist, right? How did that specific belief system make him such a problem for Kenya's new leaders in the early 60s? Well, Pinto's danger, you could say, was his consistency. He wasn't just anti-British, he was anti-exploitation, period, whether it was colonial or post-colonial elite exploitation.
So independence wasn't the end game for
Yeah, not at all. He believed political independence without real economic equality, without socialist reforms, was basically hollow, empty, and he demanded those reforms now. This put him on a direct collision course with the emerging Kenyatta government, which was, let's face it, quickly leaning towards a capitalist system that really favored those who already had land, including some former collaborators.
Okay, so he saw the betrayal unfolding right then and there. The sources mention his actions funding liberation movements elsewhere, publishing these fiercely critical articles. It sounds like he was acting as an independent conscience for the nation, something no new state really welcomes.
That's a good way to put it, an independent conscience. He used his own money, his platform papers like Saudio, Wafani Kazi, the voice of the workers, to expose things like land grabbing, corruption. He wasn't just writing essays, he was actively supporting younger, more idealistic leaders who felt the original dream was being lost.
And then came the consequence. Assassination, 1965. Broad daylight.
Yes. And it wasn't just a random act of violence. It was effectively a statement from the new state. This is how intellectual dissent, this kind of radical questioning, will be handled. With violence, it set a very dark precedent right at the beginning.
And you can still feel the effects of that erasure today, can't you? The lack of a major national monument, that detail about his quiet, unguarded grave. It tells you the state is still uncomfortable with his core message about fighting greed.
It's a deliberate forgetting, a policy of suppression, really. Because think about it. To build a proper monument to Pinto, you'd have to explain why he was killed. And that explanation inevitably points fingers at the very foundations of the post-colonial state and the wealth accumulated by its early leaders. His memory is a threat to that legitimacy.
Okay, let's jump forward about a decade. J.M. Kariuki, his famous warning. It's almost prophetic how relevant it still feels. Kenya becoming a nation of 10 million beggars ruled by a few millionaires. He wasn't just theorizing, was he? He was describing what he saw.
Exactly. Kariuki wasn't some distant academic. He'd fought in the Mau Mau struggle. He was deeply connected to ordinary people, their suffering, and he was incredibly charismatic. His focus was razor-sharp, land reform, and accountability. Now,
He wanted the land back for the people who fought for it.
precisely, those vast tracts of fertile land taken by the colonialists, he argued they should go to the landless, the poor, the freedom fighters, not be snapped up by the new elite, the president's family, the inner circle.
And his words clearly struck a chord. They weren't just criticisms. The source calls them an awakening. What happened nationally when his body was discovered? Mutilated in Ngong Forest, 1975. Can you describe that shock?
Oh, the shock was immense. Seismic is the right word. Kariuki wasn't on the fringes. He was a sitting MP, a war veteran, hugely popular. So when his body turned up burned, mutilated public anger just exploded. Students took to the streets, rioting. There was this thick atmosphere of fear, but also defiance in Nairobi. Parliament actually had to set up an inquiry.
But the source highlights the betrayal inherent in that inquiry. It didn't lead to justice.
No. It was, sadly, a classic case of going through the motions. Public pressure forced the inquiry, yes. But the findings, they were ultimately watered down, suppressed. The powerful individuals widely suspected of being involved, they walked free. It was a brutal lesson for the public. Political power could shield murderers.
So Kariuki spoke the truth about the hijacked ideals of independence, and he paid with his life. And the state cover-up just confirmed its own complicity.
It confirmed the state's willingness to protect the powerful, even in the face of murder. It set a truly horrifying precedent.
Which brings us, tragically, to Dr. Robert Uko in 1990. Now, he wasn't an outsider criticizing the government like Pinto or Kariuki. He was inside, Foreign Affairs Minister, tackling corruption from within.
Yes, Dr. Uko was different. A highly respected figure on the international stage involved in major trade talks. But his integrity, his honesty, that seems to have been his undoing. He started asking questions about government corruption, particularly around the misuse of foreign aid, and these complex financial scandals that allegedly linked top officials to, well, criminal networks.
He was getting too close to the money trail.
He was threatening the system's ability to operate corruptly, perhaps, behind a veneer of respectability.
And the result, abduction, murder, near his home in Koru. The source uses this phrase, the end of political innocence. Given Kariuki's murder years earlier, what made Uko's death hit so hard? Shatter that sense of innocence?
That's a good question. By 1990, I think Kenyans were, sadly, quite aware of government corruption, but maybe, just maybe, there was still a sliver of belief that if someone was high-profile enough, internationally respected, honest, maybe they'd be safe. Uka's brutal, still unexplained death just destroyed that last illusion. It suggested the rot went all the way to the top and that there were absolutely no checks on power, not even international reputation.
And the state did siege inquiries, even brought in international investigators like Scotland Yard. What did the sources say about what they found or what they were allowed to find?
The sources strongly suggest that these international teams pointed towards involvement at very high levels of government. They found evidence of what looked like a massive cover-up, inconsistencies in official stories, and, crucially, a complete lack of will within the Kenyan state apparatus to follow the evidence where it led upwards.
So accountability was deliberately blocked.
It appears so. Uko's case remains officially unsolved. His ghost, as the source puts it, still haunts those corridors because the truth was suppressed and those responsible were shielded.
Let's shift gears now. From the intellectuals killed for their ideas, let's look at the people who physically fought for independence. The forest fighters, the founders, who were then pushed aside, forgotten, even treated like enemies by the very government they helped bring to power, especially over that core issue, land. This feels like the deepest betrayal.
It really does. The ultimate irony, isn't it? You start with someone like Dedan Kimathi, the paramount leader of the Mau Mau. His fight was explicitly about land and self-rule. He wouldn't bow to the British, sure, but just as importantly, he wouldn't bow to the Kenyan collaborators who just wanted to inherit the colonial system.
Hanged by the British in '57, buried in an unmarked grave which is still missing. But the independent Kenyan state, the one built on the narrative of struggle, why did they avoid properly honoring him for decades?
Because the Kenyatta government, frankly, was more afraid of the idea of Mau Mau than they were of the memory of the British. Kimathi stood for something radical, uncompromising, land redistribution, real equality. These were the very ideals the new elite were busy abandoning as they grabbed power and wealth for themselves.
So honoring Kimathi meant endorsing a continued fight against inequality.
Exactly. It meant validating a revolutionary spirit that the new bosses wanted stamped out. So they feared his name might inspire people to challenge their hold on power, their control of land.
It's striking, that contrast. A statue finally goes up in Nairobi years later, but the actual body, the connection to the land he died for, is still hidden, still controlled by state silence.
The statue is the nod to history, the political necessity, the hidden grave. That's the uncomfortable truth they can't quite face. They acknowledge the hero label, but not the revolutionary content, especially the land demands.
And this theme, this idea of unfinished liberation, is personified by Field Marshal Moriyama.
Yes, Wariyama's story is incredible. He fought with Kimathi, but unlike most, he refused to come out of the forest and surrender after independence.
Why was his reasoning?
He simply believed freedom wasn't complete. The land, the core issue, was still in the hands of a privileged few. Okay, Kenyan hands replaced white hands in many cases, but the basic structure of exploitation, the inequality, that hadn't changed in his eyes, so he stayed out, a symbol of continued resistance.
So the state didn't just forget him, they actively treated him as, what, an outcast,
Yeah.
a rebel.
Pretty much a nuisance, not a hero. His incredible courage, his stubborn commitment to the original Mau Mau goals that was deliberately wiped from the official history books from public education. You won't find a national monument from Wariyama. His memory lives on mostly in oral stories, in local pride, in places like Meru and Nyambene, which proves, doesn't it, that real history often survives outside the state's control.
That kind of purity, that idealism, it leads us straight to Bildad Kajia, one of the Kapenguria Six, jailed with Kenyatta. But his real fight, it seems, started after he got out of prison.
Kajia was perhaps the truest socialist among that founding group. Others focused maybe more on political power, but Kajia was laser-focused on economic justice for the masses. His big moment, his defining stand, was in Parliament. He stood up and openly accused the new government of betraying the poor. He said independence meant nothing if the peasants who fought for it were still hungry, still landless.
Can you tell us more about that confrontation,
Yeah.
especially with Kenyatta? How did the elite react to this inconvenient honesty?
Oh, Kajia became persona non grata. Kenyatta famously mocked him in public gatherings, told him to stop preaching what he called this poverty of Christ and, get with the program, start enriching himself like everyone else. Kajia flatly refused. He wouldn't use his position for personal gain. He lived humbly, died poor.
And the source draws a chilling conclusion from that. The implied message was, Kenya does not reward clean hands.
It's a devastating indictment, isn't it? Kajia was systematically pushed aside, stripped of party roles, denied influence, precisely because his integrity was a constant living rebuke to their accumulating wealth and power. His life became proof that in the new Kenya, honesty was punished, while compromise, even looting, was rewarded. He had to be erased from the textbooks because his very existence was an embarrassment.
We should also mention others who faced similar neglect. Kungu Kurumba, a key figure in financing the Mau Mau struggle.
Karumba's story is tragic and murky. He was crucial in funding the movement, keeping it going. But then in 1974, he travels to Uganda and just disappears, vanishes. Officially, it's unsolved. But the suspicion has always been political involvement, perhaps related to dealings that embarrassed powerful people back in Kenya. His case was just quietly dropped. No closure for his family. It shows how easily even vital figures could be disappeared into state silence.
And Fred Kubai, another Kapenguria Six member, a major labor leader.
Kubai was instrumental in organizing workers, leading strikes against the colonial government, a real force in mobilizing the urban population. But after independence, his focus on workers' rights, on fair wages, it suddenly became inconvenient for the new bosses focused on accumulating land and capital. He was largely neglected, sidelined. His later struggles, his family's poverty, really highlighted how the very freedom he fought for had been, in many ways, stolen by those who never saw the inside of a colonial prison.
Okay, let's look now at those who used moral authority, political principle, to push back against the corruption that seemed to define post-independence Kenya. When political space closed down, the church sometimes stepped into the void, right?
Absolutely, especially during the Moi era, the single-party state.
Yeah.
You have figures like Reverend Timothy Njoya. He incredibly bravely used his pulpit to demand basic human rights, to call for multi-party democracy. This was at a time when saying such things openly could land you in detention, or worse.
And it wasn't just words, was it? He faced real physical danger.
Oh, yes. He was brutally beaten by police in public. These weren't just random acts, they were spectacles designed to intimidate everyone, to show what happens when you challenge the state, even using moral language. And incredibly, he also faced betrayal from within the church hierarchy leaders who preferred quiet compliance over speaking truth to power.
Yet he persisted. The source calls him proof that courage can survive brutality. But again, no state honors, no official recognition.
And that's the pattern, isn't it? The state seems to prefer its heroes safely dead or silent. Njoya is still around, still speaking out occasionally. His very presence forces a difficult look back at that repressive period. Honoring him officially would mean admitting the state sanctioned those beatings, that the single-party system was wrong. They're not eager to do that.
Then there's the deeply tragic story of Bishop Alexander Majoy. His confrontation with corruption was even more direct and ultimately fatal.
Bishop Muj was absolutely fearless in calling out state corruption, misuse of funds. In 1990, just before he was set to travel to Busia, an area where he'd been warned not to go by a government official, he made a public statement. He basically said, if anything happens to me on this trip, you know who to hold responsible. It was an incredibly direct challenge.
And he died the very next day, in a highly suspicious car crash.
Yes. His death sent shockwaves. It seemed to confirm the terrible reality in that climate. Telling the truth offered zero protection. While officially ruled an accident, very few believed it. It was widely seen as a state-sanctioned assassination. And like Njoya, Muj has no national monument. His legacy lives through the church, through those who remember his courage, his belief that faith demands you confront injustice.
This theme, sacrificing power for principle, it really finds its political embodiment in Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. His choices arguably shaped the nation's path, first by turning down power, then by consistently challenging it.
Jaramogi's initial decision was huge. Before independence, the British actually offered him the chance to become prime minister, hoping to sideline Kenyatta. Jaramogi famously refused. He said, no Kenyatta, no independence. He put the principle of unity, of freeing the recognized leader above his own personal ambition. That's rare in politics anywhere.
But then, later, when he saw Kenyatta moving away from the socialist ideals they supposedly shared, he made another huge move, resigning as Kenya's first vice president. What was the final straw?
It came down to ideology and, again, land. Jaramogi saw Kenyatta abandoning the promises made to the common person, embracing Western capitalism, allowing his inner circle to enrich themselves, often through land deals. Jaramogi felt he couldn't, in good conscience, be part of a government that was so clearly betraying the very people who fought for freedom.
And the state came down hard on him for that choice.
Oh, absolutely. He was immediately branded a communist, a subversive. He faced relentless propaganda campaigns, endured years of house arrest, political isolation, public humiliation.
But he never gave up.
Never. He consistently offered an alternative vision for Kenya, one centered on equity, on fairness, on distributing wealth. That legacy of being willing to give up power for your principles is incredibly important for reformers today. Yet the state has consistently denied him the full honor due to such a foundational figure.
And we see that same kind of consistency, that sticking to principles, in Akingo Neko, another one jailed with Kenyatta, but who also broke ranks later on.
Oneko was steadfast. While many others were scrambling for land, for government posts, for the rewards of loyalty, Oneko kept criticizing the government's excesses, its corruption. He stayed true to the original ideals of justice, even when it cost him dearly, leading to more political detention, more intimidation. He's a benchmark for consistency among those founders.
But the sources deliberately contrast him with Paul Ngai, also Kapenguria VI, also a hero of the struggle. But McGee's path serves as more of a warning, doesn't it?
Yes, Ngai is presented as a complex, cautionary figure, undoubtedly brave, passionate in the independence fight, but afterwards. He seems to have been drawn into the system of patronage and personal enrichment. He got entangled in scandals, appeared to drift away from the early ideals towards securing his own comfort and power.
The source uses him to represent Kenya's overall moral drift.
Exactly. It's like his story mirrors the nation's trajectory.
Right.
The struggle started with these pure, powerful ideals, land, freedom, equality. But for some, like Ngai perhaps, it ended with grabbing what you could, focusing on personal gain. That contrast between Waneko's unwavering line and Ngai's compromises helps explain, maybe, how the initial vision collapsed so quickly for so many.
Payday.
#, midpoint call to action, CTA. So we've looked at how these heroes, intellectuals, fighters, principled leaders were silenced, sidelined, betrayed. This history, it's heavy. But it demands more than just reflection, doesn't it? It demands action. And that's really the heart of the Kenya Wantam Notam movement mission. It's built on the idea that remembering these heroes, restoring their stories, that's work that has to be done by citizens, organized and determined.
Absolutely. This isn't just history class. This is about reclaiming the narrative and demanding change now. So we're asking you right now to become part of this. Join the Kenya Wantam Notam movement, KWM, at www.wantamnotam.com.
Please visit the website, www.wantamnotam.com. Sign up, create your account. This movement is being built by ordinary Kenyans, county by county. You'll see all 47 counties listed there. Find yours. Start posting your ideas, sharing solutions, talking about what needs to change in your village, your town, your county, the whole nation. We are trying to build the accountability system these heroes fought and died for.
And to make sure you have the background, the knowledge to fuel that action, we've got 2 essential free ebooks waiting for you on the website. Go download them right away. Number 1, we must never forget these Kenyan heroes, the very foundation of today's discussion. And number 2, Kenya after Kenyatta, the empire of looters.
Yep.
Get equipped, understand the context. It's crucial for the mission ahead.
Okay, we need to talk about the architect in many ways of this whole system of silencing, the figure who really set the course for post-independence Kenya. Jomo Kenyatta himself, the source paints him as this pivotal, almost tragic, cautionary tale, from symbol of resistance to, well, the oppressor. It is a profound transformation, and sadly, a familiar one in post-colonial history. Kenyatta endures imprisonment, becomes the icon of freedom. But once in power, he moves quickly to consolidate that power, crush any real dissent, and build this patronage system where loyalty, not principle or competence, is rewarded. He actively harassed or sidelined those who held on to the original ideals, people like Pinto, Kajia, Jaramogi, because their very existence was an uncomfortable reminder of the promises being broken.
And the physical symbols today are just overwhelming, aren't they? His face on the money, the heavily guarded mausoleum, major roads named after him. Yet the source makes this incredibly powerful point. The ground beneath his statues holds the bones of those he betrayed.
That line just cuts right through the official narrative, doesn't it? It highlights the deep hypocrisy. Kenyatta effectively used the moral capital gained from his suffering under colonialism to legitimize a system that created new forms of injustice, particularly around land ownership, benefiting his inner circle and family immensely. The monuments to him become constant, unavoidable reminders of who won and who lost in that initial post-independence scramble.
So if the silencing was so thorough, why? Why go to such lengths to erase these genuine heroes? Why did the state seem more afraid of a dead journalist like Tinto than, say, a rival politician?
I think it boils down to this. Exposure threatens profit, and integrity is deeply embarrassing to unchecked power. The leaders quickly learned that the best way to hold on to the power and wealth they were accumulating wasn't just through force, but by controlling the story, controlling history itself.
So kill the messenger, kill the message.
Exactly. If you eliminate those who consistently question the source of wealth, the inequality, you maintain this illusion of order. You make it seem like there are no honest alternatives, so people just accept the corrupt status quo. It allows the looting to continue undisturbed.
Which brings us squarely to what the source calls the monumental lie. What Kenya actually chooses to honor today. Nairobi, our capital, feels like a city built on half-truths.
It really does. It's a city whose major landmarks often honor presidents, ministers, figures who have faced credible accusations of massive corruption, of facilitating theft on a grand scale. The institutions, the road names, they tell a very selective, carefully managed story. Meanwhile, there's no national memorial, no prominent public square named for Pinto, Kariuki, Uko, Muj, or Kagia. Their memory is relegated to private grief, neglected gravesites. Those forgotten graves are, in a way, the real monuments to courage.
The source puts it bluntly. Kenya builds highways named after the looters, but has no roads named after those who dared to say no to corruption.
And that says everything about national values, doesn't it? Or at least the values of those who have held power. When a nation consistently elevates those who betrayed the public trust and forgets those who had the courage to stand up, it's essentially honoring its own subjugation. The physical landscape reflects the moral landscape. If we want to change the country, we have to start by changing who and what we choose to remember and celebrate.
And that leads us directly to the KWM's vision for memory. What should Kenya have done? This isn't just about assigning blame. It's about imagining and demanding a different way of building national integrity, grounded in truth.
Yes, we need a radical shift in how we approach national memory. Picture this. A major research center in Kisumu, maybe, dedicated to Dr. Uko, focusing specifically on understanding and combating high-level corruption, illicit financial flows. Imagine a Pinto Institute for Civic Courage in Nairobi, studying journalistic ethics, socialist thought, grassroots activism.
What about the others?
A large public park, maybe a plaza, named for J.M. Kariuki and a place accessible to ordinary people, symbolizing his fight for the landless. A prominent democracy monument dedicated to the struggles of people like Reverend Njoya and Bishop Mooj, marking the sacrifices made to win back multi-party rights. And proper national museums, not just token gestures, that honestly explore the Mau Mau legacy through figures like Kimathi and Wariyama, focusing on that fight for land and liberty.
And the resources for this. The source draws a stark contrast with current state spending.
Think about it. The amount spent guarding the opulent mansions of political figures, or on lavish state functions honoring leaders with dubious records, it's astronomical. The budget for just one of those mansions could probably fund dozens of these remembrance halls, these centers dedicated to genuine patriots, the people who actually gave Kenya its moral compass. It's about priorities. Does the state prioritize celebrating accumulated wealth or memorializing integrity? Right now, it seems to be the former. Hashtag outro. So remembering these heroes, Pinto, Kariuki, Kajia, Kimathi, Muja, Uko, all of them, it's not just a history lesson. It's actually a potent form of resistance for citizens today. It's about pushing back against the narrative, restoring balance to the story that's been deliberately skewed. It exposes the lie that corruption is just the way things are, that it's somehow inevitable or part of our culture. Their lives are proof that integrity always existed, even when it was dangerous, even when it was punished.
And we need to hold on to the specific qualities they embody, don't we? Pinto's sheer courage against exploitation, Kariuki's foresight, his warning against greed, Kagia's almost unbelievable political purity, Jaramogi's willingness to sacrifice power for principle. These aren't just abstract virtues, they feel like the necessary medicine for the moral drift that still affects the nation.
Kenya's story is still being written. It's unfinished. And the challenge for this generation, for you listening, is to actively participate in writing the next chapter. That means naming the forgotten, demanding they get their rightful place. Memory isn't handed down by decree. It grows from the ground up, when citizens decide collectively that the lies have gone on long enough.
So we have to keep asking the hard questions, the uncomfortable questions. Why are freedom fighters buried in unmarked graves while the mansions of those who benefited from the system are guarded by the state? Why do Uko's murder files continue to gather dust after all these decades? Why does J.M. Kariuki's warning about beggars and millionaires still sound like it was written yesterday?
And maybe the final thought to leave you with, drawn directly from this material, is this. Until Kenya builds monuments, real, meaningful monuments that honor Pinto, Kariuki, Kimathi, Njoya, Mooj, Uko, Wariyama, Kajia, Karumba, Kubai, Nje, Oneko, Jaramogi, until that happens, the country will remain stuck, haunted by its own suppressed history. The call to action is simple but profound. Never forget them.
So please, turn that remembering into action. Join the Kenya Wantem Notum movement, KWM, right now at www.wantemnotum.com.
Go to the website, www.wantemnotum.com, create your account, find your county, all 47 are there, start sharing your thoughts, your solutions, connect with others. Let's build this movement together, village by village, city by city.
And don't forget to grab your 2 free ebooks while you're there. We must never forget these Kenyan heroes in Kenya after Kenyatta. The Empire of Looters, essential reading. Arm yourself with knowledge.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive from the Kenya Wantem Notum movement, KWM.